ECOWAS is more at a turning point, and that is a bit like, you know, the Chinese ideogram for crisis. You know, the other side of it is opportunity, and I think we are in a big moment of opportunity for the region, and it's certainly not fated to work out badly, but I think it's a time of great dramatic change. As Arnold has expertly traced out the economic changes and challenges, Véronique has traced out the cultural challenges. It's probably worth looking at some of the, you know, political milestones in ECOWAS, because everyone got very excited about the Arab Spring in 2011. Of course, ECOWAS, or West Africa, had its own spring, a West African spring, in the wake of the Berlin Wall coming tumbling down in '89. That sent shockwaves across all the single-party regimes and the sort of putative, either slavishly pro-Soviet or slavishly pro-Western regimes, and they could no longer cash in their sort of ideological chips with Washington and Moscow. Things changed. People got on the streets. It wasn't just leaders in panic, it was actually people on the streets. Places like Lomé, places like Cotonou, places like Bamako, places like Dakar. There was places like Abidjan. There was a revolution, a people's revolution in those places. They got rid of those single-party regimes. Now, a cynic would say they're back in one form or another. They tried, and I think, you know, politics. It's never a done deal. You know, there are these cycles, but I think that was a cycle of mass mobilization and democratization, a very important one that left the region with these multi-party regimes, admittedly regimes that are under attack, mainly from the leadership and the establishment in these countries. But I think it's very important to see, when one talks about West Africa, the sort of political changes that have happened over the last 25 years. Because you talk to most international bankers, not Arnold, but, you know, I'm talking about the guys on Wall Street. They kind of have their circles around areas of great volatility, they would say. And West Africa always figures as one of those areas of great volatility. But it's also one of those areas of great economic dynamism, entrepreneurship, and vitality, cultural, economic, and in a sense political. And I think we're in for a lot of political vitality. So what happened in Nigeria at the end of March with the election of Muhammadu Buhari, you know, this is the second coming. But I think it's part of a wider political movement, and that's a revulsion against the corruption and the lawlessness of successive regimes in the country, and the way in which that was seen, those sort of regimes were seen as undermining the economic opportunities of the next generation. So yes, to an outsider, it seems curious that you would look for a former military leader to lead a crusade which was actually in favor of constitutionalism and re-establishing the rule of law. But there are a lot of paradoxes in politics, and I think there is a legitimacy in that. The movement behind Buhari was essentially a coalition, as Arnold said. I mean, his party would cause it, you know, says no, a proper party. It's really a series of opposition alliances, and who knows whether it's going to hold together. Let's hope it does. But I think they saw Buhari with this vote bank in the north, and they put together pockets of support across the country, and they're able to get this election. And how did they do it? They did it through mobilizing in part a youth vote, using new technology, and using the new sort of communication across the country and across with the diaspora. So I mean, I think those generational changes and the unwillingness to accept, just because Jonathan and the PDP had been around and they were in Abuja, the willingness to accept incumbent power I think was also a very, very important milestone. So I'd say that the significance of what happened in Nigeria, you're already seeing rumblings across the region, notably in Ghana, where the opposition leader, who's also got a similar record of trying again to get elected, thinks that this is the time, and and the points he's making about the current incumbent government in Ghana is similar to the sort of arguments that Buhari was making. Presided over mismanagement, there are deep economic problems in the country, some of them self-inflicted and some of them bad luck, climate and so on, and some of them bad timing. But I think there is a mood, certainly in Ghana, where I think the opposition feels it's got the wind in its sails. To Ghana's north, Burkina Faso, we saw a very important movement, which was a sort of I think it was a Jimi Hendrix record, Voodoo Child, called Slight Reprise. And I thought what happened in Ouagadougou last year was the slight reprise of what we saw in the early 90s in West Africa. The people went on the streets, and it got to such a crescendo of support that the long-time and extremely wily leader, first military leader, of course, and then elected president, Blaise Compaoré, had to run away to Burkina Faso and a brief trip in Morocco, and now he's back. Sorry, had to run away to Côte d'Ivoire, and brief trip to Morocco, and then he's back in Côte d'Ivoire, I think. Perhaps slightly embarrassingly for his hosts. But I mean, I think that was a very important time in this anti-third term movement. And it was a mobilization, and I think it certainly sent shockwaves to places like Brazzaville, Kinshasa, and as we're seeing this week, to Bujumbura. I don't know if all the lessons have been learned. There's certainly the military in Burundi thought they might be able to do another slight reprise last week. They failed, but I don't think the story is by any means over. And I think there is a mobilization across the continent now, and again, I think it's important that it started in West Africa, against these long-stay regimes and leaders, and against the third term. And to ECOWAS's credit, a couple of days ago, they had a meeting, and they were discussing this issue of third terms. And they said, wouldn't it be a good idea if we just had a rule across ECOWAS, no more third terms? You do your 2 terms. They do it in America. I think even David Cameron's agreed to do only 1 more term. It's not a constitutional requirement, unfortunately, because I guess we don't have a constitution, but perhaps it should be. Anyway, they came up with this, and funnily enough, the 2 guys who opposed it, Fauna Singbe and Jammeh in Gambia. I think it's no coincidence. They run the worst governments in the region. They're the poorest countries. They're the most hostile to democracy, the press, human rights, and they're running pretty bad governments. So naturally, they want another term. So I think that's another indication where you've got ECOWAS trying to push in the right direction, but you see what you're up against. So on the political front, I mentioned the rule of law and what Buhari was trying to do there, and I think it's quite, it sounds a simplistic program, reinstate the rule of law, but I think it's absolutely fundamental to what they're trying to do. All the laws against the abuse of state resources, against crony capitalism, they're all enshrined, they're all codified. It's a question of how do you get a civil service, a judiciary, and a police force, and a sort of anti-corruption intelligence service to deal with these issues and to be serious about them. And I mean, that's Cody Fayemi, the head of the All Progressives Congress, was in London a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was crowding around him, telling him, this is what you've got to do, mate. And he said, look, we're up to here with good ideas. We've got no shortage of brilliant ideas. We've got 170 million people all think they could do a better job of being president than the guy who's just been elected. The issue is how to get from where we are in the intellectual level to making a practical difference on the ground, which actually means reforming the administration and doing difficult things like running a police force. And was just talking about this issue of the border posts. You know, last time I was in Togo, about a year ago, we had about 20 police stops between Aflao and Accra. And, you know, we were chatting to people on the way. And, you know, there's a whole hierarchy of police posts, and the best rewarded ones are near the border. You're sitting on that post, you've got to harass the guy in a four-wheel drive, a car. The guy who was driving, my friend who was actually from Kenya, but they harassed him nevertheless. And they said, "What are you doing driving in flip-flops?" That's straight to the police station, you know, that's a clear fire. So, you know, you've got to hand it to them. The scams are great, they're really entertaining, very innovative, but it's a huge waste of resources. But unfortunately, the way that the police services are being structured, the only way you can earn a decent living is by being part of the lawlessness and so that's the sort of project that Buhari is trying to fix. And it sounds petty and small, but it's put together. It also, I should say, on the big picture, it is the answer to the question why. And there's this report that Tadjo has just produced for the ECA in Addis Ababa about the illicit flow of funds. Why is Africa losing over $60 billion worth of revenues a year in terms of overpriced contracts, transfer pricing, tax avoidance, tax evasion? Why is all this money going out? Because of those interlocking relationships, and that no one is policing these flows properly, and no one's policing the economic and financial system. Right? And there's a way to do it, which is not going to necessarily stimulate entrepreneurship. It should actually promote it, because if the money, the flow of illicit funds out of Africa can be staunched, and I'm not making a play on just this is a global system. It's an international joint venture between crooks in London, New York, Beijing, Singapore, you name it, and partners in the host countries, and that's the problem. So those are the sorts of issues Buhari is trying to tackle. So I'm I think very important project, and I do believe there's a seriousness across this new government. So I think what we may see over the next couple of years is increasingly, if the situation in Nigeria is contained, and there's some sort of mini Marshall Plan for northeastern Nigeria, and that there's going to be a lot more focus on that other sort of route of security crisis from Mali and Niger up across the Sahara to Libya, and West Africa as a region is affected very critically by what's been happening in North Africa, and especially at the moment what's been happening in Libya. And there's a lot of flow. I mean, certainly the Mali crisis after 2011 was very much a function of what happened in Libya. I think I read somewhere like there were sort of 200,000 AK-47s floating around, 30,000 sort of SAM missiles, mini-SAM missiles to shoot down planes. I mean, the amount of military hardware after the fall of Gaddafi was mind-blowing. I mean, even more mind-blowing was the fact that you have a NATO-backed coalition that got rid of Gaddafi, and that's why and wherefore. So that's another argument. But the fact that they say, right, job done, bye. And then we have this almighty crisis in Libya. And everyone's saying, well, what's happening next? Why? And some go, well, there's a lot of oil. There's only 6 million people. Surely it will sort itself out. And here we have the country broken apart, divided up into at least two warring regional factions and more, and the potential, if whoever wins actually, whether it's the nationalist secularists or the jihadists, whoever wins actually in Libya, the results could be bad for West Africa, or they could be bad for West African security. So I think we're not out of the woods on that one at all yet, and I think ECOWAS is going to have a big relevance there, or at least the countries together. And it's just this strange point, I'd like to end there, on what the identity of ECOWAS is. Someone said, the European Union is a political union in denial, because you cannot have a monetary union without having a political project. It may be that ECOWAS, until now, has been an economic union in denial, because it's done a lot more on the political and security fronts in terms of the cooperation and the fact that Nigeria and Ghana and Senegal intervened in the civil wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and then there was actually there was an ECOWAS presence in Cote d'Ivoire, and then of course shouldn't forget Guinea-Bissau. The ECOWAS played a very important role in restabilizing Guinea-Bissau with the election and the sort of the drug lord era, which we hope is coming to an end. And I think the point is that that role has been very much more to the fore, and I think I don't think we're going to see a diminution of that. And I think probably with a clearer leadership from Nigeria, that's going to be ever more in demand in the next few years. These security crises are not going to go away, and I think it's going to make an increasing demand on the resources of ECOWAS, and let's hope the leadership's going to be up to dealing with it.
If somehow the two-term resolution had been passed yesterday, it is unlikely, but would it actually have been enforceable in next year, potentially in the Gambia and Benin? And is it actually maybe better for the organisation's credibility that it didn't try to impose this limit?
Well, I think the thing with, if you look at Jammeh, for example, I mean, when he's a member of a club, and I guess like Groucho Marx, any club that has him as a member, he doesn't want to join. So I think he would just leave. I mean, that's all they would do. They would just say, look, the rules of the game, like the African Union, the rules of the game in the African Union is that you don't do military coups. And if you do military coups, your membership suspended. And now Abdel Fattah el-Sisi didn't like that. But he had to deal with it. The current leader of Mauritania, who is actually a putschist himself, didn't like it. So he just, wheedled around, then sort of said, okay, you're suspended, and there's sanctions from the African Union, even sanctions from the European Union for once, on Mauritania for doing a coup. Eventually they had elections, and eventually the African Union said, well, more or less, okay, you're back in the club. I think, the difficulty with the third term thing is, you can't sort of wheel your way back through the back door and say, well, and he'll probably get his son elected, I suppose. I don't know. But I think it's a big shame. I think it would be a really good time to do it, a very good signal to send to Burundi. And I think it's significant that, it was ECOWAS, it wasn't SADC or EAC or the Maghreb Union that did this. It was good old West Africa. And let's, better luck next time. Hope they do it.
You mentioned that one of the major problems is that with these integration policies, that they look outside Africa to different developmental stages to structure their own integration policies. Would it be fair to say that this is actually a fundamental problem right across Africa and every other sector, not just in integration, where there is no sense in which Africa looks inwards to develop from within? It always looks outside to see what it's going to do. I mean, you have situations where, on the political scene, for instance, the first thing that any opposition group does is appeal to Washington, London, and Paris rather than its own people and that sort of thing. And would you accept that unless that fundamental problem is addressed, all of this is really going to be just looking on the surface of things?
I think I brought it up, so at least I'll attempt to answer it. Don't get me wrong, I believe that foreign capital, foreign investment has a very important role to play in development. It's a balance that's wrong. I think that both in terms of integration and in terms of economic development in general, it's obvious it's not working. I mean, every day on TV we see these guys trying to flee to Europe, drowning in the Mediterranean. It can't be working. When we had the Ebola crisis, Africa could not react to it effectively. Okay. It can't be working. If you go to Africa, and I've been to 50 of the 54 African countries, the level of youth employment is absolutely frightening. Okay? They're pumping out these kids from universities, half-baked, no jobs. We need to ask ourselves some fundamental questions. That's probably what I'm trying to say. If something is not working, why do you continue to do it? Why don't you ask yourself? I'm not a fan of the Chinese model in its entirety, because I think that the democratic process ultimately is the right process in the long run. Okay, but it works, and funny enough, they're quite democratic. Every leader gets changed after 10 years. It's 2 terms. Okay, no third term. Okay, and it works. So the point I'm trying to make is the following. If you look at the resource gap in Africa today, the figure comes to like 300 billion. That's about, and about a third of that is infrastructure. If Africa wants to tax itself to fit that gap, it could do it. Ethiopia is doing it with the dam. Okay, but you have to look at it almost as a Marshall Plan. In other words, guys, we've all got to save to make this happen, because everybody will benefit. But if you look at it as just a budget item, we give X% to Ministry of Works, Ministry of Transport, Aviation. They always have several ministries with very different objectives. You really can't move along. I mean, the Chinese are doing something absolutely frightening economically. Some of you have heard of the Silk Road Initiative. The Silk Road Initiative really just moves the economic pool to Asia. There are 4-point-something billion people there. If they're all connected by road, by rail, by air, which is what the project says, it's trying to achieve, I mean, the economic gravity of the world just moves there. And you can see that they're saying we're not only in support, we're going to give you the money to do it. Okay? So it's going to happen. It doesn't matter whether Americans like it or not. It is going to happen. Now, Africa needs to come to its senses and say, rather than going to the China-Africa Summit, Africa-EU Summit, the Obama Summit, why don't we have an Africa-Africa Summit? Why don't we all sit together and say, guys, we have an issue. Let's fix it. The Inga Dam can be built. That can supply, 30, 40%, I don't know, if you connect it, of the power across Africa. Why do you need 10 power projects if the Inga can give you what you want in one go? These are some of the fundamental issues that we need to resolve. But the challenge we have, and I think Patrick alluded to it, is there are no leaders. Somebody has to lead that initiative. The Lagos project was just 3 heads of state. They forced the others to go along with them. Okay, it wasn't like they all sat down in a committee and agreed. Okay, and I don't like dictators, and I don't like the big political guy. But let me tell you, when there was a coup in Sao Tome, once, some of you remember, Obasanjo, if you remember, Patrick, called the coup leader and said, "You get out of there very fast, I'm sending troops in." He apologized and brought the head of state back. No, that's the truth. It's not like I'm kidding. That's what actually happened. You need leadership. Nigeria has to play that leadership role in West Africa. And if it does, West Africa transforms completely. So the long answer to your short question is yes. We need to find a model that works, because the current model doesn't work. What I'm proposing is one model. It may not be the right one, but I think it's better than what we're trying to do now.